Hi, welcome to the Catholic Corner. I'm Monsignor Walter Nolan. Today we're going to discuss the significance of getting married in our beautiful Catholic Church and how a couple who may have had a civil marriage or a non-church marriage can, what we call, validate that marriage in our Catholic Church. This following is from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops website called For Your Marriage. In the Catholic tradition, husband and wife accept a role in God's plan for humanity. They are to be the ambassadors of God's love. Through their love for each other, they show God's deep love for us, and they collaborate with God to keep humanity alive. The Catholic Church considers marriage a sacrament, a vehicle for God's graces to the couple and to the community. So, a Catholic marriage is more than just a civil or legal marriage recognized by government officials. A Catholic marriage also includes a spiritual element to the union, which I think is so beautiful, and I hope couples realize just how beautiful that gift is from God. Some of you may be wondering, if you were married by a justice of the peace and not in the Catholic Church, how can you go about getting your marriage blessed and recognized in our church? So my guest today is going to help us all out.
That's right.
Peg Hensler is the Associate Director, Coordinator, Marriage Ministries and Natural Family Planning in our Diocese of Trenton. And she'll tell us about how you can go about having your marriage recognized in the Catholic Church. The process is what we call convalidating your marriage. You can kind of write it down. Convalidating your marriage. Peg, thanks so much for giving us your time, and welcome to the Catholic Corner.
Thanks, Monsignor. I love being here.
Why don't you just maybe begin telling us a little bit about the work you do for the diocese,
Sure.
Especially the new marriage initiative.
Right. So I have been in my position as Coordinator of Marriage Ministries for 12 years now.
Ah, wonderful.
Yes, and back in May of 2015, we launched a plan for strengthening a marriage, and so it's not quite a year old, but at the time we had determined, Bishop O'Connell and our priests and various people he consulted with had determined that there was a concern about the number of couples who were marrying, first of all in the general population, but certainly the number of couples who are choosing to marry in the Catholic Church. So the plan is all-encompassing, and it's about strengthening marriage in the Catholic Church. It involves marriage through the life cycle. It involves many, many partners. But in particular today, we want to talk about convalidation. It's a word that most people don't know, but essentially it's for those people who, for whatever reason, did not marry in the Catholic Church, and their marriage is not fully recognized as a true marriage. So I'd like to talk about that today, and I'd like to talk about how we can invite people into that conversation and welcome people to think about bringing their marriage into the church and all the wonderful blessings of what it means to have a sacramental marriage.
Well, why don't we start off by talking about a valid marriage in our church? What are the three things necessary for what we would say is a valid sacramental marriage?
Great. So I would say that there are the three C's. Capacity, so you have to be physically and emotionally mature enough. Consent. You have to have free consent. This has to be a free choice for both parties. And they have to understand, I often talk about informed consent. So what I mean by that is, it is my job, and it's the job of our parishes and ecclesial communities to kind of impart to our couples what it means to live the sacrament of marriage. Because as you know, the sacrament of marriage is very different from civil marriage. And so capacity, consent, and canonical form. Canonical form means canon law. It means that we do things according to the laws of the Catholic Church. There is a rite, R-I-T-E, of marriage that's beautiful, as you know. And but the canonical form essentially is that you'd have a priest or a deacon who has faculties, who has permission to celebrate, to be the officiant at weddings, and
has permission from our bishop, and
that's right, has permission,
authorized permission.
Has authorized permission, and that the marriage typically takes place in a Catholic church before 2 legal witnesses. So that's pretty much the 3 C's.
And there are some exceptions, but
Right.
but they're
Right.
they-
So in other words, if let's say you had a person who was marrying a non-Catholic, and they had a beautiful ceremony. They were Catholic. They had a beautiful ceremony in the non-Catholic person's church. That would not be considered a valid sacrament in the Catholic Church because the Catholic party did not receive special permission to marry a non-Catholic. So you have to have permission to do that.
And there are some special circumstances.
That's
and-
right.
and,
That's right.
maybe either we can talk about that today or the next time we get
there's
together.
there's lots to talk about.
When you usually encounter couples whose marriages are not recognized by the church, when do you usually recognize that? Or when do you usually encounter couples whose marriages are not
Right.
recognized by the church?
Well, in speaking to a number of our pastors and our priests, what we hear is that when people are asked to be a godparent or a confirmation sponsor or something like that, then oftentimes they'll go to their parish and to request whatever, certificate is needed. And then at that point, they may be told that they cannot be a confirmation sponsor or a godparent because they are actually not in full communion with the church. And they didn't perhaps realize why. And at that point, we would invite them into a conversation and by all means be very evangelizing and welcoming and ask them to consider just to start the conversation. It's usually just an opening conversation with the pastor or with a priest and explaining what is required in order to bring your marriage into the church. One of the things we say is regularize your situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there are probably other times too, I guess, that would come to the attention of
Sure.
the parish.
Many times. So what we often recommend is that when there's an intake process, let's say someone's registering to be a parishioner in the parish. At that point, you would provide some kind of the person who is becoming a registered parishioner would fill out some kind of a profile. And at that point, you would assess if there's a marriage, when and where it took place, and then you would determine whether or not the marriage took place in the church, or when parents are registering their children for religious ed, or when people are registering their children for Catholic education. Those are all wonderful opportunities to determine the marital status of couples and then to be able to welcome them, to invite them into the conversation, to welcome them into the fullness of the sacramental life of the church.
And there are so many times that couples appreciate the fact that because sometimes they might not be aware of whatever their circumstances were when they got married, not in the church.
Absolutely.
And they,
Absolutely. Or perhaps when they were young, it wasn't important to them. And now it has become important to them. We totally understand that, and we want to bring everyone into the fold, and we're just so happy to do that.
Because there are so many gifts of the sacrament being part of
the graces of the sacrament.
of the union itself,
That's
and
right.
sometimes I think, Peg, that so many just don't understand really what that sacrament is saying in relationship to the covenant of God and the covenant to each other. It's such and I also just feel that marriage is a wonderful blessing of God and a wonderful blessing for people. Nothing in life is easy. I mean,
That's
it's
right.
just, we all have to work at what we do and with the gifts God gave us. But it also it's so good when they can pray together or want to be a part of something together. And I've always thought the greatest gift is when going to communion together on Sundays. And I mean, so there are so many benefits of having
wonderful.
your marriage,
Right.
convalidated.
That's right. That's right.
What are some of the ways that you or your office or parishes reach out to the couples to invite them to consider bringing their marriage
Well,
into
as
the
part
church?
of the plan for strengthening marriage, kind of getting back to that, one of the requirements of the plan is to intentionally invite couples to regularize their situation, to become validly married in the church. And so what we've developed is a very welcoming brochure. It's in the preparation stages, but that would be something that would be informational and would invite people to consider the possibility of convalidating. It sort of explains what the steps are. And then there is, we've come up with a letter that the pastors can send when they determine that a couple is not married in the church. And I used to do baptism prep in my parish, and our pastor would come in to the baptism prep classes, and he would invite couples. Oftentimes the couples either weren't married at all or they were civilly married. And at that point, he would gently and in a very loving way and charitable way invite them to consider bringing their marriage into the church.
Having been a part of that process a little bit when I was a pastor, I really do know how many couples just kind of, there's something inside of them that they just didn't know how to approach something, they didn't know who to talk to.
That's
the next
right.
thing you know, they're and sometimes they become wonderful parishioners.
And in this year of mercy, this is the time to really reach out to these couples.
What is the process, to convalidate? Can you go through the steps that somebody might want to hear?
So the steps there's a relatively simple process, but I do want to explain the different possibilities. So typically you would start with that conversation with your pastor. You would inquire with your pastor that you want to get started.
Or anybody, right? I mean,
right, or anybody, the parish secretary,
sure.
anybody,
But
right,
anybody
exactly.
That's got the knowledge
and
of it.
then you would have a first meeting at the church, and that's when you would begin to do the paperwork. There's something called a prenuptial investigation that everyone goes through. You'd start gathering your sacramental forms, and the prenuptial investigation is kind of an interesting process anyway. It's sort of the way for the couple to be able to communicate their wants and dreams and desires, and for the pastoral minister who's working for them to get to know them. It's a beautiful process, and so that's where we start. And then we have to determine whether there's any impediments to marriage, which means that they would not be free to marry. So if there's a prior marriage, at that point we could begin to work through whatever that process is, whether it's a formal case for an annulment or something a little bit simpler. We have annulment advocates in this diocese. We have a wonderful tribunal office. So your pastor, your parish can help you through that process. If that's not necessary, then you can, in addition to the prenuptial investigation, then you would have formational sessions at the parish. And that means that you're working with a pastoral minister, sometimes a mentor couple, to maybe talk about what's the difference between communicating as a couple and then really communicating to share your whole life with someone. There's a difference. And how do you embrace all of the wonderful things about the Catholic community? How do you become actively involved in that community? And how do you share a prayer life together? And all those things that are essential elements of Catholic marriage, and understanding, even building your friendship in a perhaps a different way, knowing that this is a sign of Christ's love for his church. You're a true and actual sign. You make present God's love. It's real. And to start to be able to understand that and what that means to be able to have the privilege of working with couples, because my husband and I have had that privilege. It is such an honor and such a privilege and such a gift to be able to do that. And then so once that's taken care of, then you're typically ready to start planning your liturgy. And we hope that
now,
couples
do they
will
have
a beautiful liturgy.
Would they have to take something like a focus review? I know
yes,
it's a process.
Thank you for reminding me. Yes,
if they were younger and just getting married for the first time, those are the processes.
Right.
Would they have to go through the same process?
So what we would recommend, absolutely, we would recommend some sort of a premarital inventory, which is so helpful because you can discuss all the elements of marriage in a sort of like a more formalized structure, and it helps the pastoral minister. It's sort of a tool for them to work with the couple. And there's something called focus, and there's something called refocus for married couples. So there's a kind of a difference between couples who just recently married outside the church versus a couple who's been married for many, many years. So we treat them, every case is different. We treat them all very differently.
And I think people have to understand that. I mean,
that's right.
You can be married 25 years and we're not going to talk to you like you're just out of college or something of that
That's
nature,
right.
And but I still know from experience just the beauty of the prayer and the blessings and the gift of letting them pray together or to receive communion together.
Right, so beautiful. And if a couple has had a prior marriage, which is sometimes the case, then they would go to our To Trust Again remarriage workshop,
right.
where we deal with the those all those family systems issues that are so interesting.
There are so many ways that we can at least share
Right.
the gift, the knowledge, the prayer that we have. And
That's right. And everything is customized to the needs of that particular couple.
so now you started to talk about the liturgy a little bit.
Yes, yes.
So sometimes people say, well, how do we do this? I mean,
Well, so if it's
what can they do?
right, so if it's two Catholics,
Yeah.
we would probably recommend that they have a nuptial mass. I know that years ago it was sort of more encouraged that a couple would have a simple ceremony, a simple little private ceremony. But now, because of the fact that now we know that they're going to experience the fullness of the life of the church, how beautiful is it that the very first meal this couple shares is the Eucharist? I just think that's a powerful symbol, and I love that. And so I would encourage that if couples if they're both Catholic, that they would have a nuptial mass. If they're not, then they would have a beautiful ceremony that is basically a liturgy of the word and beautiful readings, and their marriage would become sacramental in that ceremony. So, but to incorporate elements, to plan a meaningful liturgy, and to pick scripture readings that really reflect something special about your relationship. Couples have that opportunity to be able to have input, and I would encourage couples to really plan something that's very meaningful, to plan out the petitions, to plan all those things. Incorporate people in the wedding ceremony who are important in their lives. And I just think then that's kind of a beautiful reflection of that group of people who will love you and nourish you throughout your marriage journey. Just so exciting.
And there are times when even their own family can participate. I mean, if the children are older.
That's right.
I mean,
yes.
And even that
incorporate the
allows
children
them to feel a real part of that bond.
So true.
You know what I think, Peg, that sometimes, how do I always say this? Sometimes I don't think people realize that God himself, in a sense, the covenant, it's God marrying us, so to speak. I mean, there's so much of even in the Old Testament, of speaking that we are the spouse of God, so
That's
to speak.
right. Yes, it's all over the Bible. It's so beautiful.
Even in the New Testament, you know, Christ is the bridegroom and we are the bride.
Right.
So that a married couple is really very special in the eyes of God, and also I think in the whole plan of
the plan of salvation.
God's,
yes.
it's just
exactly.
And also I think, maybe even more, do we have to let our married couples go? And all of our Catholics know that they too are ambassadors. You know, they too are missionaries, so to speak.
They are.
They are being sent also in their own way to. And then sometimes I used to think how beautiful it is just to think that in a sense their family is the nuclear church. The family is kind of like the church that comes together to the gathering of the church on a Sunday or Eucharistic meal or whatever.
That connection between the church of the home and the parish churches.
And if they could see that their home is so sacred,
yes,
you know,
all the meals are
because people
sacred.
sometimes say, you know, well, how do you pray? You know, so what I tell them sometimes, I say, just pray your hands, and they say, pray your hands. I say, well, just look at your hands. Your hands hold children. Your hands bless children. Your hands hold each other. Your hands make the spaghetti or something.
That's
I mean,
beautiful.
so much of our life really comes through the blessedness of our hands, and that you can just pray that, and next thing you know, your family is praying together as they're having a conversation about what they did all day.
But it's also in the celebration of the milestones, you know, and it's all the sharing of the meals and forgiving each other. Those are things that happen all the time, and those are such important parts of our
and
domestic
you mentioned
church.
That, you know, the year of mercy. I mean,
yes.
What greater way does Pope Francis give to us that we can all just look into ourselves and really, really feel the understanding of God's love and mercy.
And it's all about the family. You know?
Because going way back to Moses, you know, when he went up on the second time to get the tablets, I always say blessed. You know, God said, "Tell everybody that the Lord your God, who is full of compassion and unyielding, you know, mercy."
Right. Yeah.
You say, you know, if only we could just feel that more and allow it to be part of our lives. What would
and as married couples, we need to be able to show that mercy to
yeah,
others.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and you know what? And it affects the next generation, the next generations.
It does.
It really
It does.
So what do you think? are there many couples that would probably like to seek to convalidate their marriage if they had the information?
I think there are many, many couples. I think there are all kinds of people that are in our pews that have children who they're raising children to live the faith, and they want to share the sacraments with their children, and that's often it can be a painful time.
Yeah.
And all they have to do is ask, and we will open our doors wide. That's what we do.
Yeah.
That's
And
what we're all about.
I know, sometimes they look at, I'll say, secular society, and they see, all of this, and that's, you can always have a little part of that somehow or other.
Yeah.
But the fact is that you're really asking for a blessing that God has given to us as a gift.
Right, and to be able to use your gifts
Yeah.
as part of the parish community, it's so wonderful to be able to serve, to be a Eucharistic minister, or to be a reader in church, or to be involved in some other kind of ministry and help other families. Oh, what a gift.
Peg, maybe you can just mention a little bit to some who will be listening to us. I think sometimes people think, they might be getting married, like maybe in a place, of banquets and whatever, and sometimes I think people might want to get married Catholic,
Yes.
and they're not so sure about everything, and they think they're getting a priest. Maybe that's a valid, but maybe it's not. Can you talk
Right.
about that a little bit?
Of course,
just
of
so
course.
that we understand.
Sure. So we do have situations where couples, they have this hope and dream for a particular wedding venue. They have this ideal of what they want, because of course the wedding industry is they're very effective.
Sure.
And so they start there, and then maybe they're encouraged by their family to have a Catholic ceremony, to have a Catholic wedding. And what they do is like most young couples, most young adults, and certainly adults like me who are a little older, will look online for things. And that's when sometimes they'll find, they do a search and they say maybe a Catholic destination wedding or a Catholic wedding in the venue. And they'll find the information, and they won't realize that the person does not have the permission to perform a valid Catholic ceremony. So it's unfortunate, but there are a lot of people out there who are willing to make money and are not completely honest about whether or not it's truly a Catholic ceremony. So we like to try to provide as much information about where you do get the right information, and that would be, of course, your Catholic parish. So any parish will be able to help you with that.
Yeah. And I think if anybody has a question, they should call the parish, or maybe even call your office or somebody.
We get lots and lots of questions about those things.
We priests are blessed also with our gift of God, but we're also part of the church and part of the bishop's guidance or part of a religious order of some kind, and we're not free. We're just not getting ordained, and we're out there doing our own little thing and starting our own little church.
That's right. That's right.
And I think that's the beauty of the Catholic Church too. That we are an extended family, so to speak, and our parishes can help each other, and certainly that we do the will of the bishop, and we do the will of God, through the gift of his love, and even the scriptures are so beautiful about all of that. There's so much in the scriptures about marriage and the blessings of marriage.
That's right. And I just heard the other day that the new rite of marriage will be coming out. So that will be that. What that means is that how the wedding ceremony is celebrated, what the words mean, all the prayers are so beautiful. And we're going to want to encourage couples to, when they plan their liturgies, to really understand what all these beautiful prayers and words mean.
And that's also, I think, the benefit of sharing the process with somebody in the parish. Either the priest, the deacon, or many times one of the ministers that they would use, to sit down and even pick what readings pertain to your heart and your way of life, and also even the music and the different things. It's all part of that one beautiful expression of God's mystery. And I say mystery because I really believe that's the mystery of God being renewed, so to speak, every time that covenant. I like to tell the youngsters when I did a lot of weddings, that as God said, "I'll be your God, and you'll be my people," I said, you're really looking at each other's eyes, and said, and I'll be your woman, and you'll be my man.
Right.
And that's the
Yes.
same kind of relationship that God has to us, that you have to each other.
That's right.
That goes right back to God in a sense. So it's not just that we want to, we kind of want them to get married inside the building.
No.
There's a whole beautiful expression of what we're feeling and what we feel God wants for us.
And it's your church family, and they love you and they support you, and it's just, and it builds the whole community, and it's just such a positive kind of energy that takes place.
And so many can get involved. The liturgy is open to have your friends, your family, or whoever
That's right.
you would like to be involved.
Right, and part of the plan for strengthening marriage is that all parishes would have comprehensive marriage ministry. So you would have couples who want to strengthen, they are motivated to strengthen and sustain marriages, and sort of like a peer-to-peer ministry where these couples can now minister to other couples.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And so in a marriage ministry, you'd probably have couples who perhaps went through the convalidation process
Sure.
and would now want to help another couple through that journey, and how beautiful that is, that relationship.
From your office and your own experience in your parish, have couples been responding to the process? And did they find it easy to convalidate?
I think we saw a dramatic rise in convalidations in the past few years. There seemed to be a little bit of a drop last year, but in general the trend is really it's increasing, and we expect to see that as fewer couples marry in the church when they're young adults. As they start to raise their children in the faith, then we would expect that number to keep increasing. So we think it's important.
But I also would say, to the couples, I know there can be, a feeling of wanting to go here and there with their plan, but it's just so beautiful to start if they can really, find the right places and all, to start with the Eucharist in their life, and to start with a beautiful gift of God's love and
right.
and
And
mercy,
non-Catholics who have experienced a Catholic wedding, they say there's nothing like it. They've never seen anything like it.
I can tell you, as a priest of way over 40 years, one of my greatest loves was to celebrate the great gift of it's amazing. Can our viewers get out the word to others who might be interested, and how would they contact anybody? How could they contact?
Well, the main way to get started, of course, is to contact their parish.
Okay.
But if they have questions about convalidation, I've done lots of work in the area, and I'm happy to help them, so they can contact me.
Get a hold of Peg.
My number is 609-403-7156.
BuildingStrongMarriages.org.
That's right.
Bless you. Keep God in your heart, in your prayer, and you'll never be sorry. Thanks, Peg.
Thanks, Monsignor.